All right. This meeting is being recorded. Welcome to the weekly SIG Docs meeting for Kubernetes. I am Zach Corlison, your intrepid editor and current meeting host. And we'll be following along with the agenda posted in the usual place. We have a lot to cover today. Our agenda looks deceptively short, but each one of those topics on the agenda is quite weighty in its way. So I'm going to be holding us to a tighter schedule today, and I may jump in and moderate discussion a bit just so we can make sure to get to everything that we have. So before we get started, do we have any new attendees today?
Yeah, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Hi, so my name is Anthony, and I'm on the customer-facing team at Google. And so just kind of wanted to attend this meeting as I'm kind of interested, or I've been working a lot with Kubernetes the past year and a half, and just interested in how special interest groups work and thought Docs would be a good place to pop in. So hopefully I'm not intruding or, yeah, but this is... It's good to be here.
Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you. Welcome. All right. Let's move on to agenda items. First up is Doc Sprints with Jared. Hello, Jared. Tell us about Doc Sprints.
Hello. Hopefully everybody knows what Doc Sprints are. So we've been approved to run a Doc Sprint at KubeCon coming up. So, and we're also, I'm helping run a doc sprint at Write the Docs in Melbourne. So I'll be filing an issue for the Melbourne doc sprints, which is going to be pretty casual around a lot of fairly non-tech writers who don't have a lot of experience with Kubernetes. So it'll be a lot of like learning GitHub, becoming contributors, cleaning up some of our outstanding issues. That one I'm a little less worried about and a little less concerned about. The one for KubeCon, I think, has a lot of opportunity for us to engage.
I think we have a frozen Jared.
I thought it was just...
Jared, we lost you for a second there.
Oh, no. Improve some of our doc processes. So Zach created an issue for the Kubernetes KubeCon doc sprints, and if folks here have ideas or projects they would like to pursue or that they would like to present there, I'd love to hear them. Please add your feedback to the issue. I'm going to be writing up a general one-paragraph blurb to go in the packet that attendees are given to kind of pitch attending the doc sprints, and we'll take it from there. So that's all I got.
Thank you. And I just posted a link to the issue for KubeCon doc sprints in chat. So if you want to go take a look at that, that's where that is.
Yep. I'd like to come up with a process of kind of like packaging up these doc sprints for other people to run. So after doing one at Write the Docs in Portland and this one at Write the Docs in Australia and the upcoming one in KubeCon, I think coming up with a standard playbook for running these things would be really useful. So Andrew, I'm going to take some notes from your release playbook and kind of base it off that.
Okay, cool.
Sweet. Thanks.
Right. Awesome. Thank you, Jared. Next item is onboarding for new contributors. So Jared and I have been talking. We have some new contributors coming on, and we'd like to be more intentional about onboarding new contributors in general, because right now it's sort of, it's not sort of, it is very ad hoc. And we'd like to do better at onboarding new contributors. So that is something that I'm working on right now. Brad and Chris Nagus and Andrew, also from Red Hat. And we have a couple of new maintainers from the Chinese translation team. So I'm going to, I'd like to contact you within the next week or so and put together a schedule, like a very short and informal syllabus of how to get into the workflow of Kubernetes Docs, and provide you a little bit more training than here's the repo, kid, succeed. It just seems like an awesome thing for us to do for new contributors. So if you are interested in being a guinea pig, willing participant for onboarding, please contact me in Slack or by email. And we'd love to get your feedback on both what should be in the onboarding process and how that goes for you and what your experience is like. All right, that is onboarding for new contributors. Yes.
My suggestion for that would be to put that into the documentation that is already there called Contributing to the Kubernetes Docs. Okay, just to keep all that information in one place. I think the only thing that we don't want there is if we're getting to the point where we're just talking to some very small group that we want to keep, out of the public view. But for this kind of thing you're talking about, I think this is information that just should be available to anyone who's asking themselves, how do I contribute to the Kubernetes Docs?
Certainly. Jared, any feedback on that? You're muted.
Yeah. No, that sounds good to me. And keeping all those resources in one place makes a ton of sense. So, yeah, I think investing a lot of time in how we onboard people is going to be massively important, because we are starting to have a lot more people knocking on our door wanting to contribute. And part of the being a, I guess, premium member or like the platinum members of the Linux Foundation is that you contribute TechWriter headcount to SIG Docs. So having a path to onboard those people and making them, feel welcome and useful and making our processes clear is going to help them out a lot. So,
excellent.
Could you provide a link to what we should read before we start the process? I'm not sure I have that one.
That is an excellent question. I don't know that we have anything quite so formal as read before we begin. What we have right now is if you go to the Kubernetes documentation website, there is a little collection of pages called Contributing to the Documentation. And that's what we have right now. And that's part of what's driving the need to do better at this.
Yeah, I think right now new contributors are latching on to folks who have been, longtime maintainers, and we're kind of onboarding people on a one-off ad hoc basis, which doesn't scale. So surprise, surprise. So we need to fix that. And yeah, you're asking the $10,000 question, and we don't have a good answer to it.
Okay.
We're all tech writers here. So.
Okay, thanks.
I put the link in the chat that goes to the top level for the contribution docs.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. All right. Moving on to migrating the Kubernetes blog from Blogger to GitHub. So I talked with the blog team at the Linux Foundation yesterday, and their enthusiasm for getting off of Blogger was very high. There's some fairly compelling use cases for consolidating all of the material, all of the content that goes on the Kubernetes website into the GitHub repository, and consolidating both the content and the workflows into the repo. And I know that Nate Karchner, Caitlin Barnard are very excited about the possibility that they might not have to use Blogger anymore. So,
what were the issues with Blogger? I'm not a giant fan of Blogger, but I'm more curious. Sure. What were the issues that they ran into? So
the most recent example is Blogger's WYSIWYG editor has fairly limited functionality, and they were running into some formatting issues that required removing all formatting and then manually reapplying it when taking the results from a Google Doc collaboratively created and then pasting it into the WYSIWYG editor. And even though it looks good in the editor, the generated output doesn't conform to the appearance of the WYSIWYG.
This was the 1.8 launch
Yes.
announcement. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And that in the workflow process is that it doesn't really make a lot of sense to collaborate on a doc in Google Docs, publish that content in Blogger, and have that workflow restricted by yet another level of credentials. I mean, GitHub has the answer to all of the workflow problems, and that's a solution. It's like improving workflows in GitHub is something that we can all do collectively for Kate's docs, and so helping them to do that with us rather than trying to iterate on an increasingly obsolete publishing platform just seems like a better solution. It's a way to resolve technical debt as well.
Yeah, and I remember like you and I were both begging them for access to the
yes.
to the blog to fix the issues, and they're like,
as it turns out, they were very happy to give that access, but they would be even happier to not have to give us access and just do everything inside of the GitHub repo.
Cool. All right.
Okay,
Thanks.
so that solution, as I looked at it a little bit yesterday, and that migration process looks non-trivial. It doesn't look like it will be huge, but it is non-trivial. And so if there is anyone who is interested in adopting that and kind of shepherding it along, that would be really awesome to do, especially if you've had any like platform migration experience before. This would be a great opportunity to jump in and do that. Give some thought to that. I would love to manage it myself, but with 1.8 or sorry, with 1.9, with the doc sprints, with everything coming down the pike in Q4, it's going to be a little busy, and I would like to give it the attention. I'd like to give the migration the attention it deserves. I don't know that I can do that for Q4. So if someone else is interested in shepherding that process and shepherding the migration, here's a golden opportunity. All right, Andrew, we had a
for that Zach that's tracking that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, is there an issue tracking that?
There is. I put a link for it in the.
Yeah. Sorry. Totally see it.
Okay, so we have next on the agenda is a proposal to rename the repo for documentation from Kubernetes/kubernetes.github.io to Kubernetes/website. And Andrew, this is your proposal. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, so I've been talking to Tim Hawken, and it's kind of clunky and no longer accurate for the docs repo, or I mean, I guess generally it's the whole website, right? So it's no longer accurate since we're not hosting on GitHub for it to be like Kubernetes.github.io. So there is a nice sort of like redirect mechanism in GitHub, so we can rename the repo and connections will get like redirected to the proper one. So the proposal is to name it to something more kind of obvious. And it could be, we could do it as Kubernetes.io, but I still think that's clunky. I think if we just did it as Kubernetes/website, that'd be pretty clear on what it is. So when people look through it in the list of Kubernetes repos, it would be pretty obvious. So so if everyone is okay with that, like we can just set like a cutover date, and then I'll work with Tim, and then he can just kind of switch it over.
Any thoughts or discussion? Let's see a thumbs up from Steve. Thumbs up from Joe. Thumbs up from me too.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. One of the reasons why we had the GitHub.io repo is because it was easier to surface in GitHub pages. So now that we're using Netlify, it's kind of pointless. Are we worried about like backwards compatibility or any issues with that?
No, I mean, according to Tim, like we can just set there's like some internal redirect mechanism. So when you try to connect to the old like kubernetes.github.io, it should, connect you to the, website one. Like there should be there's an alias mechanism.
Great.
So you should be able to do it seamlessly. And it shouldn't take that long at all.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no complaints from me. That's
okay. Because it was getting confusing when we were trying to reference the original, the main Kubernetes repo versus ours. So, okay, I'll work with him and get it done then.
Excellent. Okay, let's see. Just going to make a note. Andrew will work to perform cut over. All right. Next on the agenda, we have Joe Heck is going to give us a short overview about generated docs, specifically for kubeadmin. And this, I think, will be a precursor to a longer presentation about automation after Joe and Andrew and Steve get the chance to coordinate about automation. But Joe, you want to give us an overview of what you have learned about generated docs with kubeadmin?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was hunting down a bug, just picked one up kind of at random and was tracking it down. There are a number of documentation pieces that are being hosted in our GitHub repository that are generated from Go code in the Kubernetes repository itself. And it's been updated with a script in there called hack generate docs that doesn't automatically move it over, doesn't even create necessarily the correct output. And then after that process, it looks like we've been editing the docs in Markdown, not necessarily always regenerating them from scratch. So I know there's multiple tendrils to this. I've only found one portion of it, and that's just related to the kube proxy documentation because of the bug that was filed. So I wanted to throw it out there that this process probably needs to be tweaked a little bit, and it looks like there's some portions of this that are being generated in an incubator repo that we also want to pull in. I don't necessarily have a proposal or a plan or even know where all the pieces are to this. I was going to start off by just documenting this in the how to contribute to Kubernetes docs and mention where it is, just in here's the reality of today, and then we figure out a way going forward. So want to throw it out there so that if anybody had something, oh, hey, don't do that or whatever, we could tackle it. The other part that I was wanted to throw out was a suggestion perhaps that we put a note in the repo under that admin section in docs to say, don't edit these directly, regenerate them. Here's where to go get that information on how to do it, so that we don't get into this hand edited, not updated in the source upstream kind of space that we're in now.
Interesting.
So I can give a little history to why certain things are in the incubator. Phil Whitrock back, I don't know, it's probably a year ago, really, had this passion to get the reference docs in this format, this 3-column format where you had left nav and docs and then examples on the right. And he couldn't get a lot of support from it from his engineering group, so he pretty much did it as a weekend project and has, it's been his effort that's kept that going. And so, he has it in the incubator at this point. And he's getting to the point where he can't, he just doesn't have time to keep maintaining that as his weekend project. So I have volunteered to take ownership of that code. So I'll be, involved in this effort to get all the auto generation story sorted out. I'm in complete agreement that we don't want to both auto-generate and then hand tweak the docs. We need some way to always go through make the fix at the source, which is in one of 3 repos as far as I can tell: Kubernetes/Kubernetes, Kubernetes/API machinery, and Kubernetes/API. So I'm in agreement there, and I'm interested in being on whatever team we form to get this all straightened out.
Excellent. Steve, what do you think about documenting that in the contributing section? I know this is a little bit of bike shedding, but
this is one thing where I think we probably want to keep this. We don't want to put this in the public docs because I don't think we want any contributor trying to figure out how to go into the Kubernetes API machinery repo and propose a change there. I mean, maybe later, but for now, let's keep this knowledge to the SIG.
Okay.
To the docs.
I do feel strongly that I want to document it for other people so that they don't have to retrace my steps. Where should I put it? Totally happy to put it wherever you think is appropriate.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have to figure that out.
Maybe we
So I
start
put
in
it in the chat.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said I put it in the chat, but there's more of this on the way from the Kube conformance work group. We're annotating the E2E conformance tests so that we can generate a conformance doc. So, if we need to worry about that as well, let me know. We'll see what it's generating. It's going to be a reference doc, and if you're like, hey, there's yet another one-off, might be something to worry about.
So, are we going to have different processes for generating different sets of docs?
Well, we only generate one doc, but if you look at, if Joe's found like 5 others and we've got a pull request that's about to get merged that says, hey, we're putting all these annotations in, we'll generate a little doc as well. It's just one more down the pipe. I can get more details on it and what it generates, but yeah.
So yeah, it does sound like it's adding complexity to the
it does.
The generation pipeline.
But it's just one more. Just one. Yeah, no.
Let me get the PR number if people are interested.
I definitely agree that like this is like we don't want to become like there's all these like little tiny processes that you throw in to generate everything in our docs. But I also get the importance of automation. So why don't we start documenting this process? It sounded like we're trying to figure out where to document this to start with. Yeah, so I think why don't we start a Google Doc with that information, share it with the group, and we'll start from there, and then we'll figure out a place to land it. I think this, I know wikis embedded in GitHub never get a lot of attention. That might be a good place to put more of this private material. I'm reluctant to keep this stuff permanently in Google Docs since GitHub seems to be the place for things permanently. So, but that's just like a sort of off the cuff thought right now. Let's start it in a Google Doc and track it from there.
I have just a quick question. So does this include sort of the broader, let's track down all of the automating, all of the CLI and ref docs? I guess, Steve, especially your mention of this. So we're talking about the core API reference docs also as part of this?
Yes, yeah.
Because when I started chasing that one, the first thing I ran up against is, these are comments in the Go code in the core repo. I am a new contributor. I'm not even going to go touch that.
I ran into the exact same thing in the exact same situation.
Yep.
So, yeah, I understand that. I also, if somebody in investigating this stuff could somewhere along the way unearth why we're not using the Swagger / Open API spec for this stuff, I would be interested in hearing about that too.
I can tell you. The gist is that when the code was originally being developed, they took the CLI arguments that are in a library called Cobra that are that's in one of the GitHub pieces, and they used that to generate the output. So it was specific to a CLI, which is not necessarily applicable to the Open API stuff that's happening within Swagger and the REST APIs. It's a whole separate set of APIs they were messing with.
Right. I figured it was at least partly a larger architectural thing. And then that also helps explain why it seems like some strings in the ref docs are pulling straight from code that I can identify and understand, and others are not.
So the API docs. So what Joe said is about the the command line docs, but the API docs are generated from Swagger Spec.
They are, okay.
And so the way that works is that the swag. This is my best understanding. I think I'm right about this. This document API something folder swagger.json is automatically generated from source code from several Kubernetes repos. Then Phil's tool that he now has in Kubernetes Incubator takes as its only source of input that Swagger JSON file.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so if we need to make changes to the ref docs, we have to go to the original source, which is in one of those three Kubernetes API, Kubernetes API machinery, and Kubernetes repos.
I think if we eventually want to make a case for streamlining API generation, that being able to point to all of this stuff concretely is going to be really helpful. So my guess is that documenting how all of these things are generated and following all of the trails back to their origin is going to be really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big points I made in the retro from the 1.8 release is that we have to know how to do this ourselves, and we have to be able to do it a few times during the lead into a release. Not, the way it has worked is that near the end of the release, we find the one person who knows how to do it and ask them to do it. If that person happens to be on vacation for a week or something, we're in a bind. So we want to get all this stuff. We want to know how to do it, and we want to be able to do it ourselves and do it several times during a cycle.
Absolutely. All right. Is there anything more to say about that?
I have one more small thing. A nice to have in the short term, I would hope a must have in the long term, is the ability for writers to touch those strings in the code to clean up places where, shall we say, they are less than completely helpful. They're kind of classic. They aren't exactly like Java getters and setters docs, but they read like that. The blank endpoint gets the blank, that kind of thing.
I think we can do that. I think you can submit pull requests to Kubernetes/Kubernetes.
Right.
I'm about to go through that process.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I guess I wouldn't do it without first feeling like I had my feet more solidly under me in that particular segment of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully having documentation about how to do this will provide that ground. Joe, I see in chat that you are taking an action item to create the Google Doc for this and start coordinating with folks to get that done. So awesome. Thank you. All right. Moving on. Let's see, generated docs. So Jessica and Andrew have been working on a Kubernetes glossary, and Jessica has offered to provide a demo of the glossary. So take it away, Jessica.
All right, can you guys hear me? Okay, cool. So I guess the main point, there are 2 points to the glossary that I want to highlight. The first is for a newcomer coming into the Kubernetes docs. There's a lot of terminology and it's not clear what's Kubernetes specific, what is just applicable to the general, I guess, cloud native ecosystem and things like that. So the glossary is meant to enumerate all those terms, and so you can go to it as a source of truth. Also, we'd like to use it as a way to modularize our documentation a bit better, where if we define those terms in the glossary, we can reuse those definitions throughout the documentation. So that's just a little bit of context I wanted to provide. Let me share my screen. Sorry, 1 second.
Okay.
Oh no, too many tabs.
Andrew
Thank you.
has also provided a link to the PR deploy in Zoom chat.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yep, we can
Sure
see
can.
it. So
Okay, great. So we decided to put it under reference. We can decide like whether we want to surface it a little bit more publicly, but for now it's just gonna sit there because I think conceptually that makes sense. So when you get to the glossary, we decided to have the fundamental tag on by default because these are the terms that you care most about as a newcomer. And all of these are expandable, so these are like the short definitions, and if you expand them out, they all have like, oops, oh no. This is just my computer, like, dying. Oh gosh. Okay.
it's all right. There's always like,
Yeah.
we
All
get
right. Well,
failures.
trust me that these all expand out and they work. I've tested them. Okay, they're cool. And then also like they have links attached to them. So if I wanted to be able to link directly to this, there's the permalink that you can always go to. Like there isn't an actual use case that we've like demonstrated, but I just imagine that would be useful at some point.
Well, also if a term references other terms, we can use that link in
link to other terms. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so basically the idea is you have all these tags. If you like hover over them, since I know extension might not be clear necessarily to someone who comes in, so it has like that little short description that's flashing around right now. So you can select any set of tags. So if, say, for example, we wanted to include user type, now you see that there's like application architect, application developer, and so on and so forth. And for all of these, I'm like, every time you select one, I'm making sure to update the URL. The idea being that the state of the screen that you're looking at now is reproducible so you can share it with other people. And it's not just like, oh, go to this page and make sure you select all these things. So you can deselect all of them. You can select all of them. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much what we have now.
Jessica, you want to show maybe an example of the YAML file? And then, yeah, maybe one of the terminology files.
Yeah, is that, I guess I should just go to the
PR.
Yeah, sorry, let me work this. Okay. So basically the way that we are storing all this information are in YAML files. So there's like a directory of canonical tags. Those correspond to the things you can select. And then we also have YAML files for each of the terms. So I guess if you wanted to see what an example would look like where all the possible things, like it's pretty flexible. If we wanted to add more attributes, we can easily do that. It's just for now, we wanted to stick with like the ID, which is how we're referencing it in code, like the actual human readable name. AKA is just like, for things like stateful set, where previously it was referred to as pet set, it's kind of nice for someone to be able to search that. And then there's related, so similar terms you might want to look at. Tags, which is what we just went over, and short description and long description. And also, like, because we know that, like, I guess, like, humans are going to be adding this stuff, and we want to make sure it conforms to what we already have. So we also, like, added something to the CI so that if someone is adding a tag that doesn't exist, it, like, will error out. And so we, like, know that it should fix. We should either add a tag or make it be a pre-existing tag. Yeah, I think the rest of this is just, like, the actual JavaScript.
Yeah, and so there's a short description and a long description, and the idea being like, in some cases, if we wanted to use like a tooltip, like, you know, hover over, we could use a short description. And then if you want like more information, you can use both. Because one of the ideas is for like pods, for example, like in the summary section of that page to reuse the terminology snippet. And then like use both of them. That way, you know, we can keep the stuff sync, and I think it might make better use of the summary sections.
This is really cool. This is really nice.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, Jessica did a great job with the implementation. It's pretty amazing.
there's one thing that I thought, well, it also depends how many people actually find this page, but since these are all like A tags and you have like the little, the Google Analytics plugin, I'm not sure if we'll actually be able to see anything useful, but it'll be kind of neat to see like the percentages of people clicking on tags or expanding out terms and things like that.
It'll be awesome to see like the site analytics for the month after this merges.
Yeah. And definitely, like, I think as a continuation of this, like, this is just like the starter set of terms. There are a lot more terms we obviously want to define. So I think we'll probably like make a list and stick it in the project, and anyone who wants to contribute can probably just like chip into that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and the beauty is like you can just drop in a new terminology definition in that directory, and it will automatically show up on this page. That way we don't have to manually edit it each time.
Mm-hmm. Yay. Okay, that's pretty much all I had to say.
I'm just sitting here like,
Thanks, Jessica.
Awesome. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's massive.
Really nice.
Yeah, super awesome.
Yeah, I like how you do the short and the long description, so if you ended up wanting to do the tooltips, is really cool.
Yeah. That's just really cool. So we had originally had scheduled today, Jessica was going to do a code sample prototype for us, but instead she was awesome in a different way. So Jessica asked to bump the code sample prototype to next week. So does that
Please and thank you.
Is next week reasonable, Jessica?
Yeah, sorry for the delay.
Please. I don't think you need to apologize for being awesome. So, okay. Any last minute items for the agenda? Going once? Going twice? Sold. That's a SIG meeting.
Thanks a lot, folks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.